So, welcome to Bath in Somerset, United Kingdom. We're about 2 hours west of London here, and we're in a fantastic Georgian town, probably the best in the United Kingdom. But not only that, we have Roman baths, we have an abbey that you can see behind me, we have a Royal Crescent, we have fantastic shops, and boy are there tourists here, and with good reason, because it's amazing. I've done two things today. I've done a bus tour and I've done a little walk round to try and inform you what you'll see, what you can expect, what to do. So I hope you enjoy and find this useful. Thank you. So I guess the first question you should ask as a tourist visiting Bath is it actually worth coming here? Well, I guess the long answer is yes. You have the Roman baths, you have the Roman Abbey, you have a fantastic bridge, you have the Royal Crescent. There's history galore here, but I wouldn't make it a priority. If you're in London and you've got a couple of days and you want to explore outside, you'd be far better doing Windsor and Oxford for different reasons. Oxford, in some ways, is very similar to Bath, but it's an hour closer. It's only an hour from London, whereas Bath is 2 hours from London. And Oxford is bigger and it has more to see. You can explore Oxford very happily for a day, whereas I would suggest you probably need half a day in Bath. That said, Bath does have history. It obviously has the Roman baths that we're looking at here. It has the Bath Abbey that we're looking at here, unfortunately shut today because of graduations. It has loads of shops and restaurants, and it has the River Avon going through it. So in some ways they are very similar. There's lots of restaurants, there's lots of bars, there's lots of museums to look at. I also mentioned Windsor. Well, my problem with the Royal Baths is value for money, really. We're looking at the side of the Royal Baths here, and it's £28 per person to get in, which I think is an awful lot of money, particularly if you're a family. And the thing with the baths is there's not actually much to see. Yes, it's 2,000 years old. Yes, it's got Georgian architecture built around it. Yes, there's history galore in there, but it's not enormous. You go to Windsor, you can go into Windsor Castle for £26, and the value proposition is significantly better. You can spend, if you want, a whole day in Windsor Castle, and there's loads to see. You've got the castle itself, you've got the state apartments, you've got the burial place of Queen Elizabeth, and it's only 40 minutes from London, whereas I mentioned again, Bath is 2 hours. Bath is somewhere you should come to as a tourist if you happen to be on your way past. Maybe you go to the Cotswolds, it's on the southern edge of the Cotswolds. Maybe you're going down to the West Country, to Devon or Cornwall. Definitely then stop off at Bath. But you won't regret it. I'm just saying that use your time wisely. Now, the great thing about Bath is it's actually fairly compact. It's still a large town, but it's relatively easy to walk around. As long as you're happy to walk 10 minutes here or 10 minutes there, you can see the whole of Bath without spending any money at all. I'm going to go on the open top bus tour in a few minutes, and I wouldn't say it's not worth doing. It's absolutely worth doing. It allows you to explore Bath, to hop on and off in different places. But you don't need to do anything other than walk around Bath. You don't even need to spend money to go into the Royal Baths, although I appreciate that if you're coming from overseas, you're visiting Bath perhaps for your only time, you're going to spend that £28 and go in on the right here. But the point of Bath is the architecture, the history, it's Georgian history in particular. And they've done it very well. They maintain it very well. It's hugely touristic, as you can see. The place was packed, particularly in the centre. But the moment you edge out of the very centre of Bath, here I am, 2 minutes walk from the centre of Bath, down by the River Avon, the crowd's thin, and you just get these beautiful vistas and views. The parkland is fabulous. You don't have to even eat in a restaurant. You can take a picnic into the park. You can sit in the park on a glorious day like today, down by the River Avon, looking at these amazing views. So Bath isn't somewhere you have to go and spend a lot of money. It's more difficult to do that in Oxford, I would suggest, because Oxford is much more built up. I think there are less accessible parks. And Windsor, well, if you're going to go to Windsor, you are going to go to the castle, so you're going to spend that £26. But actually, having been to Bath and questioned previously whether £26 was worth it, I think that £26 is worth it to look at Windsor Castle. I do have a video on both Oxford and Windsor, so have a look at them. But here we are, probably one of the best views in Bath coming up right now. So if we look up the River Avon here across the weir, which we're going to see in a second, we get our first look at the famous Pulteney Bridge. This was designed by Robert Adam, who is famous for his Georgian architecture in the UK, and was built in 1774, although the bridge was actually designed, I think, 5 years earlier. And it's a fantastic Palladian bridge across the River Avon, and it's unique because it's one of only 4 bridges in the world that still has shops lining both sides. The interesting thing, and we'll see in a few minutes, is when you actually come onto the bridge, you're not even aware of its being a bridge. It just feels like the street narrows slightly, but the views across the River Avon here, as you can see, are just fantastic. And if you have a chance to go up onto the hills and look back at Bath, it's really well worth it. But as I said, 1774 this bridge was built, and it's hugely photographed. It hasn't been pedestrianised, which I find astonishing. I think it should be, given its age and its fame in Bath. And I do think looking at the bridge from the river is probably the best view you find in Bath, along with perhaps the Royal Crescent. But you can see when you actually come onto the bridge itself, whilst it's lined with shops and it's very popular, you wouldn't be aware you're on a bridge. There's nothing to indicate you're walking over a river, nothing to indicate you're on a bridge. If you look through the shops, particularly the florist we've just passed on the right, you can see the river through the windows. But a lot of these shops, you can hardly see into them or through them. And then as you come across the bridge, you come into another area of fantastic Georgian architecture. So it's worth walking and exploring, and I can't really stress that enough. I mean, I spent the day in Bath, as I said. We'll look at the bus tour in a few minutes, which has its value, but the bus tour can't show you everything and can't allow you to stop and look at things in a way that you can when you're on foot. And this Georgian town, these houses here at the end of the Pulteney Bridge, are just fantastic. And then as we walk back across the bridge again, as I said, you would have no idea this was a bridge unless I was telling you it was. We are on the bridge now. And then back round to the River Avon again. Now, as we walk back along the River Avon, having been across the bridge, to the right here, we have the Bath Guildhall Market. And there's been a market apparently on this site for about 800 years, I think since about 1274 or something like that. But the building that we're entering now is a 19th century building, and I wish I'd spent more time looking at the architecture, actually, because the architecture in here, having done a little bit of reading about it subsequently, is fantastic. But I would highly recommend coming into this market. And again, it's another reason for walking around Bath. You don't have to spend money to come in here. Of course, you can spend money in here if you wish. There are coffee shops, there are food shops, there are trinket stalls, and it just has a certain character to it that actually surprised me, if I'm really honest with you. And it's surprisingly large. I'm not sure the whole thing is Guildhall Market. I think we come through into other areas. Apparently there are 5 good markets in Bath. This is the only one I visited. But you can see as we walk through, loads of character, loads of areas for you to explore. Should it be wet, and of course it's never wet in the UK, but should it be wet, this would be a great place to come. And I would highly recommend it. And it walks you through ultimately back down to the High Street. But we'll have a look as we go through. It takes you through to the other side, to the main road. And as you come to the main road, and we will in a minute, past all these fabric shops and so on, which are just beautiful and worth browsing, it's worth going, as you'll see, as we do, straight across the main road and into another market. I have to say, actually, I was quite impressed with the shopping in Bath. I thought it was particularly good. The high streets in general in the UK are in decline nowadays because of COVID, the move for online shopping and so on. But all of the streets around the Bath Abbey, which seems to be the centre, the Bath Abbey and the Roman Baths, as they're so called, seem to be the centre. But all of the streets are good. And then we come down into this market, which is called the Corridor. And it is literally that. It's a corridor which runs down to a very famous shopping street called Union Passage, which runs parallel to Union Street. And all of this area is just brilliant, I have to say. I've been to Oxford, I've been to Cheltenham, I've obviously been to Windsor, London, and the shopping in Bath is probably amongst the best that I've seen. So if you are keen on shopping and you have the time and you're in Bath, then this is probably the best place you can find to do that. Completely different character, of course, to the Guildhall Market that we were just in a few minutes ago. Loads of ubiquitous coffee shops and so on. And then we come out onto, as I said, Union Passage here. But we're going to go, I think, left and down Union Passage. Very characterful, very famous actually, but you've got to explore. It's a bit like Greece. I've got loads of videos on Greece, and those who watch me regularly know I love Greece, but you'll never find these places unless you walk and are willing to explore a little bit outside of the very centre area. But we've come down Union Passage. We're now on an area called Cheap Street. Again, more shops. I actually had a lunch down here under these umbrellas on the left. I can recommend it. It was very, very nice. But as I said, you can also have lunch in the parks. Here we are in the park by the Abbey, and it is fantastic. Now, we're about to get the bus tour, and for those of you who want to pick up the bus tour, there are actually two loops. I'm doing the city centre loop, and you can see it here, and the main stop is right by the Abbey at the end of Cheap Street. So as we start off on this bus tour, which just takes you around the centre of Bath, you'll notice that I get two different vantage points, this at the back of the bus, and also I have a vantage point to the front of the bus. And the reality is, as you'll see, that here we are, the front of the bus, I went round this route twice because I felt that if I did so from two different vantage points and then stitched it together as I've done here, it will give you a great feel for what this tour offers. It's £20. There are two companies that offer this tour in Bath. You can find it online. The Totes bus, I think, and also the city sightseeing. Now, I've done the city sightseeing tour a few times, but the great thing here is it's £20 and you can use either bus and you can hop on and off. There are about 20 stops, I think. And actually, it was really good because it gives you a different perspective on the city. As I said, you don't have to do this. You can walk around the city. There's nowhere that this bus goes that you can't walk to, but you do see it from a different perspective. And it makes me think that I haven't actually really talked about Bath as a city itself. I mean, it's quite an ancient place. It was thought, and there is archaeological evidence, that there was a shrine dedicated to the goddess Sulis, who the Romans identified as Minerva. But Sulis was a god of the Britons, and there have always been hot springs here. The water comes out at about 45, 46 degrees centigrade. And it's thought that in pre-Roman times, the Britons felt that this was a sacred place and venerated their god Sulis. The Romans then came in and in AD 60 to AD 70 constructed a very simple temple across the site of these springs. And effectively it was a wooden building and completely different to what we see nowadays. And this is why I'm a little bit dismissive actually of the bath, the Roman baths that we see now, because they're not Roman. The majority of the building that was seen now and constructed was constructed in the 19th century. If you pay your £28 and you go into the Roman baths, yes, the basic foundation of that building where the baths themselves are dates back to the Roman times, but anything from effectively ground level, from the base of the pillars up by the Roman baths, is 19th century Victorian creation. So they've done it very well, but it's, I think, a little bit misleading. But anyway, Bath is on the main train line. We've just seen the train station. We've just gone past the bus station. It's very well located and easy to get to. And the Romans built this building, which was then abandoned after the 5th century, when the Romans had to abandon the UK and effectively return to the marshes. Apparently it was completely swamped by the water that existed, obviously, at the springs. And it was only in the 14th and 15th centuries with the reconstruction of the Abbey. Now, the Abbey was originally constructed in the 7th century and then was rebuilt in the 12th century, but fell into disrepair, particularly after the absolution of the monasteries by King Henry VIII in about 1538. And the then Bishop of Bath decided to rebuild the Abbey, and they rebuilt a relatively small church on that site. And subsequently then in the 16th and 17th centuries, that was again added to create the building that we see nowadays. I am told, although I haven't done it, that you can climb up to the top of the spire, the Abbey Tower, and the view from up there of Bath itself is fantastic. So that may be something you want to do. I don't know if they charge for it or not. But anyway, so the Abbey was reconstructed in the 17th century, and rather like Cheltenham to the north, suddenly Bath became very popular in Georgian times for taking the water. It was believed, and it may have been put around by the church who wanted some money, that the waters of the Roman baths had medicinal and healing properties, and so Bath became a spa town. So rather like the Regency town of Cheltenham, which is on the west side of the Cotswolds and to the north of Bath, Bath effectively became a tourist destination for people seeking to take the waters and heal themselves during the Georgian period. Now, Bath was popular slightly before Cheltenham. Cheltenham, as I said, Regency 1810 to 1820. Bath was really constructed from 1750 onwards, and we see that the Royal Crescent was constructed, I think, in about 1767 to 1774 or something like that. But we'll talk about that in a minute. And the character of Bath with this Bath stone, this very famous honey-coloured Bath stone, particular to the southern Cotswolds in particular, was by the Georgians. And you have this amazing Georgian architecture, which is what makes Bath so beautiful. Now, due to this spa industry, Bath had a huge amount of money, and you see that it attracted many famous people and money was spent in Bath. It became a hugely popular Georgian and Victorian tourist town, and it remains popular today as a result of that. It is in a beautiful area of the country, I have to say. Now, Bath, unfortunately, was heavily bombed during the Second World War by the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, in retaliation for the British and Americans bombing a number of beautiful German cities at the time. And 19,000 buildings were destroyed or damaged, and 400 people were killed. So it was a pretty terrible time. But rather than knock it all down and reconstruct it as they did with a lot of London, particularly the East End of London, they kept the character and they rebuilt it. Now, on this bus tour, we're now entering an area called the Circus, which is one of the key popular destinations in Bath, I have to say. And of course, on the bus, you can see it very well. And this was constructed originally in 1754 by an architect called John Wood the Elder. However, he died less than 3 months after the first stone was laid, and it was his son, John Wood the Younger, who completed the design in 1768. Now, John Wood the Younger actually created the Royal Crescent, which of course is so famous in Bath for things like Bridgerton. And it's worth walking around the square and having a look at the buildings because they have many emblems such as serpents, acorns and nautical symbols on these buildings, because apparently Wood admired the prehistoric and the legend of the Druids. But we're now coming up to the Royal Crescent, and at this point I'm going to get off and have a look at the Royal Crescent because it is the most famous thing in Bath, and it would be daft not to get off and have a quick look at it and just talk a little bit about its history. And this will be famous to you for Bridgerton. I mean, other films as well, but Bridgerton on Netflix, of course, is what the Royal Crescent is known for. So having completed the circus that we've just looked at, John Wood the Younger then constructed and designed and constructed between 1767 and 1774 the greatest example of Georgian architecture probably found in the United Kingdom, which is this, the Royal Crescent. It's 150 metres long. It has 114 iconic columns and 30 houses. Now, if you want to see what they're like inside, number one Royal Crescent is effectively a museum, and you can pay to go in there and have a look at it. It's been painstakingly reconstructed in the style that would have been common at the time when this was constructed in the first place. But this is yet another fantastic park in Bath that you can come to. It's free, you can bring a picnic, and you can pretend that you're one of the characters in Bridgerton because it is beautiful. And on a day like today when the sun's shining and it's not raining, it's well worth a visit. Now, what I haven't mentioned, of course, is that Bath itself, the entire town, was designated a World Heritage Site in 1987 and was later added to the transnational World Heritage Site known as the Great Spa Towns of Europe in 2021. Bath is also the largest city and settlement here in Somerset. But here we have Victoria Park. Now, this is an interesting park because it was opened by Queen Victoria when she was 11 years old in 1830. Now, she wasn't Queen Victoria at the time. This was 7 years before her ascension to the throne and was the first park in the world to carry her name. And believe me, there are a lot of parks in the world now called Victoria Park. It was privately run by the Victorian Park movement until 1921, when it was taken over effectively by Bath Council. It's 57 hectares, and it has a skateboard ramp, tennis, bowling, and as you've seen, a number of beautiful houses, including the Royal Crescent here. Now, you don't get a great view of the Royal Crescent from the bus. You have to get off the bus should you wish to see the Royal Crescent, but this is the best view you get as you come through Victoria Park. And the whole park is worth exploring should you have the time and should it be a nice day. Today they had graduation ceremonies in there. There were marquees set up because there is a University of Bath. You'll have noticed a number of people walking around. We think they're postgraduates, actually, probably doctorates. But the place was full of people graduating, their parents, proud parents, quite rightly. And as we come out of Victoria Park, we're almost back into the centre of Bath itself again. It is a city of 101,000 people, but it's not huge. You can walk around it, provided, as I said, you're happy to walk for 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, etc. Now, as you explore Bath, you'll notice that there are a number of areas called Gate. You have North Gate, West Gate, South Gate, etc. And this, of course, is reference to the original walls which would have surrounded Bath. Certainly, the Romans built walls around here, and those walls existed through into medieval times. They were about 1,200 metres long, it's believed, and evidence of them has been found at the back of the Royal Crescent. And these walls protected originally the Abbey and the Roman baths from attack. And during the time of King Alfred the Great and round about then, it's thought that perhaps 1,000 people lived within these walls and defended the area from attack. During the English Civil War, which occurred round about 1640 to 1649, Bath was garrisoned by the forces loyal to the King, Charles I, but very quickly it fell. And although Charles and his supporters had spent several £1,000s reinforcing the city, the moment the parliamentarian troops turned up, the gates were thrown open and the town surrendered. And perhaps because of that, unlike Gloucester, for example, or Bristol, which were effectively razed to the ground, Bath was spared, and a good thing too, because if it hadn't been, we might not now see what we can enjoy today. But we're coming back round to the Abbey. We're obviously driving past again the River Avon. And this time, instead of going straight on down to the station, which is straight down there, we're going to turn right, back up to the Abbey and back up to the bottom of Cheap Street, where our bus tour will end. So I hope you've enjoyed this little video. I hope it's given you a feel for Bath. I've rambled a little bit. There's a huge amount to see in Bath. As I said, my personal recommendation, if you're in the area, it's an absolute must-see. But if you've only got 2 or 3 days and you're starting in London, I would recommend Windsor and Oxford over Bath, partly because of its location and partly because of the value for money that you'll get from Windsor and also exploring Oxford itself. But here we are at the end of our little tour, and I hope you found it useful. Well, I hope you found my little look at Bath interesting. I've tried to vary what I've shown today with the bus tour and also the walk around the centre. I hope you agree it's a fantastic place to visit. You can see it's very, very busy. It's only going to get busier in July and August, so be prepared for that. But should you come here, you're in for a real treat. If you like what I'm doing, watch some of my other videos, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.